In this video, we're going to do an overview of the landing page editor by showing you step by step how this clean, effective landing page and this thank you page with a video on it were created. But the first thing you should know is that if you don't want to start from scratch, you don't have to. You can use one of our over 100 templates in our template library. Let me show you where that is. If you go to the main navigation and then templates, then you click on the landing page library, you'll see all of the templates that we have available in the library. From here, you would choose the one that you wanted and click Add. As soon as you click Add, you can go to My Landing Pages, and you'll see that it's here as well. Now, if we go back to our blank landing page, we can bring this page right in and start editing from here. Here we are in a blank landing page. We can come to these three dots here and click Replace with Saved Landing Page. From here, I can choose the one that I just selected and click Replace. Now I've got a professionally designed landing page that I can click and drag and edit however I need to put in the pictures that I want and my own logo, and that way I can edit this page as opposed to create it. Now let's go back to a blank page and I'll show you how to create the landing page that we talked about in the beginning. Alright, now if we're starting from scratch, the first thing I'm going to do is manage the canvas background color and the adaptive background color. I can manage the page properties at any time by clicking on this Page Properties tab here. First, I'm going to go to the canvas background. Here, I'm going to change the canvas background color to white. Then I'm going to come to the adaptive background color, and we'll make this gray. You'll also notice that we have other options here as well, both in the background and the adaptive background, where we can change it to a gradient, we can add a background image, or even a background video. Later in this video, we'll be adding a background image and a background video to this landing page so that we could see how sharp we can really make these pages. Now, I want to explain to you the difference between the adaptive background and the regular background. If we click Save, we can now click the Preview button and see what this looks like. If we were to look at this page as it currently is on our cell phones, it would look like this, where the canvas would be the only thing that we would see. However, if someone were to open this page, let's say on a desktop or a laptop, then they'd see the adaptive background as well. So as we make the screen bigger, you'll note that the gray background, or the adaptive background, can now be seen. Okay, let's get back to editing the landing page. You'll note that there are three separate areas which we can operate in the landing page editor. The first are the widgets over here on the right. We can take these and drag them to the canvas. This is where we get a preview of what the landing page is going to look like. And finally, on the left, we've got the area in which we can manage the properties of the widgets that we drag in from the right. So let's start by bringing in an image. When we bring in an image, the first thing that happens is it'll open up the image library. Here you'll see that there are lots of folders. Many of them have locks on them. Any folder that has a lock on them, you can use the images that are in those folders. However, you cannot add images to those folders. That's why they have the lock. If you want to add images, the first thing you'll need to do is add a folder. Once you add a folder, you can then add images. So now let's go ahead and add the logo. Now that we have the logo on our canvas, we'll want to align it to the top and center of the screen. There are a few things we could do. We can grab it with our mouse and move it around and try to get it perfectly lined up here. Or we can come over here to geometry. In this case, we can put the left position, make sure that that is 0. Make the top position, make sure that that is 0. Now the logo is aligned perfectly to the top and to the left of the canvas. In this case, it doesn't look as good when the logo is actually pushed up to both edges. So we may want to make the logo a little smaller. We know that the canvas is always 320, so in this case we'll grab the edge of the logo, hold down the shift so that way we can keep the dimensions proper, and then make the logo just a little bit smaller. Now that we've made the logo a little bit smaller, we may have moved it just a little bit, so we'll want to come back over here and make the top position 0 again. And now we have it perfectly level at the top of the screen. The next thing we're going to add to this landing page is some text. We can grab the widget from the right and drag that in, and then on the left we can come over and click on the text to edit our text. Alright, so now that I've got the text in here, again you'll note that whenever we bring in a text widget, it comes in at 320 pixels. So it will be lined up to the left edge and the right edge all the time. So we'll probably want to make that a little bit smaller. We can bring that in, and then we can edit the text some more. If there are parts that we want to make bold, we can highlight those parts and click B for bold. And once we click back into the texting area, you'll see that the change happens out here. We can also change the size of the text, change the alignment of the text if we needed to, and we can even change the color of the text if we needed to. Now let's go ahead and change the font. Here you'll see that we've got a series of fonts that we can choose from. I'm going to choose Railway, and you'll see that the font changed instantly. Okay, so now let's add another image. This time we're going to add a picture. These are all images that we've created someplace else and brought into MOBIT. Now this image is obviously a little too big, so again we're going to come to the corner, hold down the shift, and make the image smaller. Now underneath this image I'll add a shadow. Again, I bring the images and I drag the image in. This time I'm going to go to the shadow folder. If we scroll down, we'll find the line shadow. If we choose that, it comes in right here. I like to make it a little bigger first just so that it's easier to move, and then I align it directly underneath the image. Now I'm going to bring in a little signature line underneath the image. And now we're going to change the font. Now again, I can make this area much smaller and just center it right underneath the picture like this. Now I'll add a little more text just above her image. Okay, next we'll bring in an arrow to point down to the form that we're going to add down here. So again, we'll bring in an image. Next, in order to put the form down here, we're going to need to make the page longer. So what we can do is grab any one of these three and drag them down below where the page is. And you'll see that it makes the page longer. Now I've got more space to continue editing my landing page. The next thing that we're going to need is a form. So I can drag in a form and we'll ask for name and email. So I can click those over here. And on the email, I'm going to make the label hidden and I'm going to make the field required. And I'm going to do the same thing for the name, but I'm going to leave the label there just so that you can see how that works. Here I can change that from first name to, let's say, name. And now I click done. And from here, you'll see our field has been created. We've got two fields and a submit button for our form. You'll note here that the label, email, is inside the field. And up here, the same is true with name, except name is also on top. And that's because I did not hide the label for that field. And I did that just so that you could see where that is. Now we're going to click on the fields themselves where the form is. And I know I'm on the form because if I come up here, I see that I'm on properties for the form. And I'm going to hit manage form fields. Now from here, I'll click on name and I'll hide the label. Now it looks like we want it to look. From here, I'm going to go over to label style. I'm going to change this to a 14 size point. That way it's a lot easier for customers to click with their fingers into these forms. Then I'm going to make the form width a little smaller as well. From here, I can edit the button by clicking on the button. And now I know I'm on the button because under the properties it says submit button. The first thing I'll do is change the label. I change what it says. I'll also change the font as well so that it matches the font that we have above. I'll make the font a little bigger, and then I'll change the background color of the button. I know the colors we're using in the logo, so I'll use those colors. Now from here, if I click off of the button, you might notice that there is a green border around that button. So if I click on the button again, we can go to the border, and here you see that I've got options to make the border larger, to increase the corner radius, and to change the color. So here, I'm going to change it to the exact same color as the button. Now I'm going to make the button wider and move it down from the form just a little bit. Now you'll note that this form, this white on white, doesn't really stand out much. It's actually kind of hard to see the form. So what we'll do is we'll add a spacer. A spacer is this widget here. When we bring this in, you'll see that it just comes in as a green square. We can change the geometry. Again, we know the form is a width of 320, so I'll make it exactly 320. and I'll make the left position 0. And I can drag it down just a little bit. You'll see now that the spacer is actually covering the form. We don't want this, so we can send the spacer to the back by using the layering buttons up above. So from here, I'll just hit send to back. Now the form is in front of the spacer. Now I'll change the color of the background of the spacer. And again, I'm going to use the same colors that are in my logo. Now I can add more text just above the form. And this time I want it perfectly centered. So I'm going to go to geometry and do left position 0. And now what we'll want to do is change the color of this font. So we could change the font to white, or we can come in here and make it F0. I like F0 because when we click out, we can actually still see some of that text there. If we make it white, then the text goes completely away and it's hard to find it. But here it still looks pretty close to white. Okay, so now we're almost done with this. We'll put a shadow underneath this button. Again, this time we'll go to shadows and we'll go to the top where it says bottom shadow and hit choose. See that put a shadow here. Again, I like to make the shadow bigger. So I drag it down, makes it bigger, and then I put it underneath the button. And then I can resize it to exactly how I want. Now, if you look close, you can see that the shadow is actually on top of the button. So again, I'm on the shadow, so I can just click send to back. And now it puts the button on top of the shadow. So again, that is how we can layer all the things that we want to layer here. And finally, we can go ahead and put a footer onto this page. So we'll grab a spacer. Now we're still on the spacer. And so what we can do is send backwards. And then from there, we can bring to the front. And that'll cover up those other buttons that are no longer required on the form. Now we can put a footer on this page. It will also send to the back and bring to the front. And then we'll add a quick image down here. So we'll drag another image in. And that's all it takes to make this wonderful landing page. Now, if we wanted to make the space in between here smaller, what we need to do is take all these elements and move them up. One quick way to do that, as opposed to grabbing each element and dragging them up separately, is we can drag all the elements at the same time. The first thing we need to do is select them by holding Control or Command if you're on a Mac. When we select them, you'll see that they turn orange and they are highlighted. Now, with our keyboard, we can move them up. So one thing that we're going to want to do continuously while we're building these landing pages is select Save. Now we can come over and preview as well. So when we view this on a phone, it'll look just like this. Okay, now let's build the thank you page with the video. So the first thing we're going to want to do is change the name of this page. And we can do that by coming over here to where it says Title and Metadata, the main landing page. Now we'll click Save. And now let's go ahead and save this main landing page to our landing pages. So we'll click these three buttons here and come down to Save to My Landing Pages. Now, when we go to the thank you page, we can bring in that same exact page so we don't have to reconfigure the backgrounds and all the other things. We'll have the look and feel right away. Here we can go to Replace with My Saved Landing Pages. And we can choose the one that we just saved. Now we can take away all the elements that we don't need, simply by clicking on them and then clicking Delete, or by clicking Delete on your keyboard. Now here we'll just edit the text. Now that I've put the first line in, the second line, I want to go ahead and merge their name into this landing page. Once I have their contact information, I can merge in their contact information on any MOBIT landing page. I can do this by coming up here and clicking Insert Custom Field. In this case, we'll take the first name. Now I'll edit the rest of the text. Okay, so from here, we're going to go ahead and add a video. The first thing we need to do is come over to the right and grab the video widget. Now we'll need to come down to video and put in the video URL. If we hover over the question mark, it gives us examples of how we can bring in the video URLs. In this case, we're going to bring in a YouTube URL. Here, you'll see exactly how to bring in the URL. Note that you can't just use the URL that YouTube gives you. So what I like to do to make things easy is highlight this part, copy it, and we'll start with that. Then all we'll need is the end of the URL that we get from YouTube. So here on YouTube, I can just come down here and click the share button. From here, I can just take this little end part of the URL. You can also get this from the URL in the search bar as well. Now I'll go back to MOBIT. Here, I'll scroll to the end of what we have and paste in the end of the URL. One thing to note here is you may notice that it actually brought in more than just the end. So in this case, I want to go ahead and delete everything else that it brought in and just keep that ending. Now when I click out of that field, we'll have our video ready to go. In order to test this, what we're going to do is click Save and then come over to Preview. In the preview, we can see what it'll look like on the cell phone with the video intact. If we press play, the video will start to play. Under the video, we're going to put some more text and a few calls to action, and the resources that we promised above. Okay, now that we've got our call to action images in, we can go ahead and link these. So first, I'll click on the first image. From here, I can go to Image Properties, and now I could put a URL. So if I want them to be able to click to call, I could type in the URL, tel:, and then put my number in. Then if I want them to be able to send me an email, I could do the same thing with send a message. This time the URL will start with mail to. This will open up an email in their default browser with my email address in the to field, so that way they can send the email straight away. In any image that you have, you can link them to any URL that you want to send people to. Next, I'm going to bring in a few buttons to link to resources. This widget here is for buttons. Now, to create a new button, I can just use the duplicate feature instead of creating another button from scratch. All I need to do is change the label. Now I can move these down a little bit and add some text in the middle. And finally, we can go ahead and put links behind these buttons as well. So again, from the button properties on the left, we can come down to click action. Here we can go ahead and put in the URL to the resource. In this case, we have the resources hosted in Dropbox. Now on the landing page, we didn't want to put any distracting material like links or anything like that that would take people away from the landing page because we really wanted them to give us their name and their email. However, on this page, we can afford to put more detail and links to other things if we wanted to. So in this case, what I'll do is add an image to the adaptive background. So in this case, if they were looking at this image, let's say from their desktop or a laptop, they'd be able to see a nice image in the background instead of just the gray. To do this, we're going to go to Page Properties, and then we're going to go to the Adaptive Background. And here I'm going to hit Background Image. We'll use this one. Now let's click Save. Now let's preview this so we can see what it would look like on somebody's desktop. Again, if somebody was looking at this from their cell phone, this is how the page would look. However, if they were looking at a desktop or a laptop, then they'd have this image in the background, while the form was dynamic in the middle. Now, let's see what it would look like if we put a video in the background. So the first thing we'll want to do is remove the image. Now we can come down here to the background video. Here, we can just take our URL straight from YouTube. So let's go back to the YouTube video, and here we'll just copy the URL directly from this page. Now we'll come back and put that URL into this field. Click Save, and let's go back to Preview. This time you'll see the video playing in the background. And that's it for the basic overview of how to use the landing page editor in MOBIT. Pull widgets into the canvas from the right, edit the elements on the canvas over here on the left under Properties. Remember, while you're in the landing page editor, to click Save often. If you have questions, you can always come up here to our knowledge base, Or you can always click down here, and one of our staff will answer your questions as soon as we can. Happy texting!